Okay, so today what I wanted to do was go a little further with some of the capabilities of the Friedman IR-D, and I wanted to try to integrate it with my Quad Cortex kind of into a digital rig. So I want to look into, how does it play in front of the Quad Cortex? How does it play maybe in the effects loop so we could put some things on the Quad Cortex before the IR-D? And I want to dive into how can we make the Quad Cortex control the IR-D via MIDI. So if we look over here, I've got two of the apps up. I've got the Cortex control up so we can see what we're doing on the Quad Cortex. And then I've got the Friedman editor up so we can look at that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the MIDI list so we can have that up at all times. If you haven't seen my first video on the IR-D, I go through all of the features of the pedal on its own. So today we're not going to get too far into trying out all the controls on the IR-D itself. Go look at that other video if you want to see that. I'll link to it here. But let's start off with the IR-D in front of the Quad Cortex. So I'm going to put up a diagram here. Is how I'm running the Quad Cortex is I'm actually running into an overdrive pedal and then into the IR-D, and then the output of the IR-D is running into the input of the Quad Cortex. And then from the Quad Cortex, I've got a couple things going on. One, I've got some cables going to my studio monitors here in the room so I can hear it. Two, I've got the USB cable coming to my laptop so I can record into Logic so you can hear it. And then I have the MIDI cable running from the Quad Cortex to the IR-D so we can control it. And the preset I've got set up is pretty simple here, and we'll go through it in a second. But the first thing I want to do is, the IR-D, in my opinion, has a little bit of a low output level. It keeps it kind of line level. So what I like to do is, if we hear what it sounds like just on its own, it's a little anemic, and I think you get a better tone if you bump up the input level. And I've had good luck at putting this at about 6 dB. That gets us to a little more input level from the IR-D. And in the preset, it's important to think about what the Quad Cortex is doing or what role it's playing in this setup. If we are in a studio, the Quad Cortex is kind of playing the role of what would be in the kind of control room. So think of the IR-D as kind of the mic'd amp, and then the Quad Cortex is taking that output, it's taking the level in. We're going to EQ it a little bit. I always like to add a little bit of a low-high cut, so I've got my standard here 70 and 6000. And then we'll add a little bit of delay and a little bit of reverb so that we can just have some ambience. All right. So now we've got our preset and we're getting a tone into the Quad Cortex. We're getting a Logic, you can hear it. It sounds good. So let's get the Quad Cortex controlling some aspects of the IR-D. And so what I want to do is, if we bring up Gig View, and I've already labeled some of these on what I want to do. So the first thing I want to focus on, the bottom row, I want to switch channels and turn the boost on and off. So in this scene, I'm going to go just channel 1 without the boost on. This is going to be channel 1 with the boost on. This will be channel 2 without the boost on. And for right now, we'll ignore the P. We're going to start playing with some of the presence controls as well. And then this one's going to be channel 2 with the boost on. So one of the things to remember, if we go back to here, what can we control via MIDI on the IR-D? We can change the channel. We can turn the boost on or off. We could turn on the bypass for the looper or the bypass for the IR. And then we can change the settings for the IR, the presence, the deep, the low pass, and the gate. And today what we're going to focus on is the channel and the boost, and we might do the presence a little bit as well. But the way we do it, you could do it for the other controls as well. So let's start with this channel 1. So one of the things we want to do is, we want to, for each scene, send the MIDI signal that makes sure that it goes back to the configuration we want. So what we want to do here is we want to go up to this menu here, and we're going to preset MIDI out. So these are all the settings for the preset MIDI out. We're going to choose the scene we want. So this is scene E. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure when CE is pressed, it sends the right MIDI signals to the IR-D, that it makes sure the IR-D is on the channel 1, and we make sure that the boost is off. So we can see here that channel is a CC signal and 24. So what we want to do is turn on type, it's CC, channel 1, CC number 24, and value is between 0 and 127. So the way this works is really you only want to use 0 and 127. Well, not necessarily, but let me describe how it works. If you choose 0, it's always going to basically put that switch in the off position, which in this case is channel 1. So that's going to be what we want. If you choose 127, it's always going to put that switch into kind of the on position, which would be channel 2 if you're changing channels. Anything in between, any value in between from 1 to 126, if you send that number, the IR-D is just going to flip whatever it's setting it's on. So we want to send a signal that forces it to be on channel 1. So we want to choose 0. And then we also want to send a signal to make sure the boost is off. So 25 is the CC number. And again, the value is 0. So we say done. So now if we go over here, if I, for instance, switch this to channel 2, right now you can see I'm on channel 2, the boost is on. And so if I go back to the Cortex control and I select scene E, you can see it changed it to channel 1 and the boost is off. So let's say we go to the configuration for the other scene where we change to channel 2. So we want that to be G. And here we would do CC 24. And here we want the value to be 127. And if I go here, CC and 25, which is, we want to keep it 0 because we want the boost off. So now if I press this one, it switches to channel 2 with the boost off. And we're back on channel 1. So. So what we would do now is we would go through all the scenes we want to set up and we would do that. So this one, we want to stay on the first channel, 24, 0. Now we want to engage the boost. We would change this to 25 and we would turn this to 127. Now if I go here, it's going to go to channel 1 with the boost on. And then we would just continue on doing that. So for this one, I want channel 2 with the boost on. So 127 for channel 2. And then for the boost, we choose 127 for the boost being on. So now I can just switch between the channels I want. There, the boost is on. That goes to channel 2, boost is off. Here it goes to channel 2, boost is on. If I go back to this one, it'll turn the boost off. So now I've got the Quad Cortex controlling the channel and the boost. Let's tweak the presence a little bit on some of these. So what I want to do is I want to create a new preset up here that's going to be the same as this one, but it's going to turn the presence down a little bit. So it's going to change the presence. You know, right now it'll be on presence value 1 because the presence values are 0, 1, and 2. So if you look at this, it's like 3, that's 2, that's 0, that's 1, that's 2. So we want this one to turn the presence to the value 0. So it's lowest setting. So what we would go is we go up here, preset MIDI out, we'll go here. So one thing on the Quad Cortex, and I find this a little frustrating, but when you copy a scene, it doesn't copy the MIDI settings for the scene. So you always have to do it from scratch. It's a little annoying, but so we want 127. We want, so here we'll go to the boost and we will turn that on. 127. And then we want to do 29, which is the presence. And we want to set value to 0. So done. So if I'm here, if I go here, what you'll see, if you look here at this presence control, you'll see this drop. See how that went down? I might use that if I just want a smoother lead. So one of the things I'll say now is if I go back to this one, it's flipping the boost off, but the presence is staying down, because what we need to do is, now that that scene is changing the presence value, we need to make sure that these scenes set it back to where we want it. So I would go back to here and I would add in the setting here for 29, which is the presence, and I'd set that back to 1. And then I go here and do the same thing. So now I've got the presence set back versus. So that really allows you to kind of have full control of the IR-D. Now I don't need to stomp on any of the settings on the IR-D. I can change them all, control them all from the Quad Cortex. So that works really well. Let's go ahead and switch it up, and let's put the IR-D in the effects loop of the Quad Cortex and see what kind of difference we get. Okay, so now I've switched it up and I've got the Quad Cortex basically controlling the whole flow. So I'll put a diagram up here. So what we can see is the guitar is going into the Quad Cortex. I've put the IR-D in the effects loop, and then the rest is the same. I've got the Quad Cortex going to the studio monitors and USB to the computer, and I've got the MIDI cable connected so it can still control the IR-D. But the difference is now that the signal is kind of getting converted from analog to digital a couple more times. So before, we were going into the IR-D with, the drive pedal in front of it. That was all kind of analog. And then we were going to the Quad Cortex. It was getting converted to digital there. And then it just went out USB, got recorded. Now, guitar into the Quad Cortex, it's doing the conversion. And then it's converting it back to analog to send it out. And then it's converting it, then it's coming back and reconverting it back to digital. So what I want to see is there a difference in the tone and the feel of what I'm getting from the IR-D when it's going through those extra steps? And also to kind of talk about kind of the advantages to this. So if we look at the preset I've got set up here, we've got all of our MIDI controllers set up. If I go ahead and bring that up, I've already got all those set up. And the one thing we need to do is I need to go back to the I/O settings. I'm going to drop this back to 0 dB. And what I'm doing is in the effects loop, I am dropping the send level a little bit to get kind of back to kind of a regular guitar level into the IR-D, and then I'm pumping it up 8 dB coming back. And I've also got an adaptive gate after the IR-D, but it's triggered from input 1. So the reason I'm doing this is when you're flipping the channels in the IR-D, sometimes you can get some pops, and in the effects loop, that some of those pops can be annoying. So by putting the noise gate after the effects loop, but having it triggered by the input, when I'm not playing, even if I switch, you won't hear the pops. So if I go and I'm switching scenes and it's changing the IR-D, you're not hearing any pop, pop, pop. If I turn this off, you'd hear more noise. and little pops like that one that just came. So turn on the noise gate, and again, I'm side chaining it to start from the input, and we're good to go. So now in front of it, I can put things. So in this case, I've got a compressor, I've got an overdrive pedal, and then we've got our low-high cut and delay and reverb on the back again. So let's hear how it sounds. I turn on the compressor. If I just go to the boost, we can engage the icon maybe in front of the channel 2. And maybe even do like a lead. So let's start off with saying, I think it still sounds good, and it sounds like the IR-D. I do think the feel isn't quite as good as going direct into the IR-D. So I'm losing a little bit of the immediacy of the touch. You can't really hear it, but in terms of the feel, it's there. But obviously, there's a lot of advantages to this. Now, let me say this. You probably would not use the IR-D in this way. So if you want to use the IR-D with Quad Cortex, I would capture it, I'd bring it in as a capture, and then I'm not doing that analog digital stuff. Or I'd put it in front of the Quad Cortex like we started out. I think normally if you wanted to stick with the IR-D and kind of stay in the analog world, you'd use something like a Boss ES3 or ES8 or something like that, where it's like a switcher and it's sending many signals and it's controlling it. You wouldn't do this, try to integrate into this digital. So I don't know that it's a realistic test. It sounds good, it works. I just don't know that it's getting the best out of both devices. So let's go ahead and we'll run through the tones here, and you can decide whether you're hearing a difference versus what the IR-D sounded like, kind of more direct. So we'll leave this up so we can see what we're doing. And we'll start off, we got this clean tone. We have the compressor. Or we can even add the archer to this. Or obviously we just have the boost. And then channel 2. Boost that. Or we can go ahead and kind of do a full-on lead tone. So it sounds really good. I do think I prefer kind of going direct into the IR-D. I think it just feels more, I don't know, immediate. But it definitely sounds good. I would bet that on the video, you're probably not hearing that much of a difference. It really is just a sense of kind of the feel when I'm playing. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting. And if you're trying to kind of control the IR-D with MIDI, I hope you found this helpful. And as always, thanks for watching.